We are coming up to Shabbos Chol Hamoed Pesach, and I wanted to talk about the connection between Shabbos and Yetzias Mitzrayim, aka the leaving of Egypt, and the Exodus, which is the theme of Passover. Are they connected in any way? So the first source that we're going to look at is our Friday night Kiddush. So after we say the Yom Hashishi and we make the blessing on the Brei Pragafen, we make the blessing of actual sanctification of Shabbos called Kiddush, which in it utters the words, if you see, Be'ava v'ratzon chinchalanu zikaron l'maise bereshis techila l'mikra kodesh zeichel yitzias Mitzrayim. So let's translate those words that I've uttered from it. His holy Shabbat as a heritage in remembrance of the work of creation, the first of the holy festivals commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. So right away there, we see in our Friday night Kiddush, we say that Shabbos is a commemoration of the creation of the world, which makes a ton of sense, right? Because Shabbos is was God's original resting from the creation of the world. So when we rest on Shabbos, we originally hearken back to God's original resting, which was a resting from the creation of the world. So obviously, keeping Shabbos helps us remember that God created the world. But there doesn't seem to be any like boom connection between Shabbos and the leaving of Egypt that just comes to my mind right away. That's like, oh, that's so obvious that the two things are related, and that by keeping Shabbos, I automatically commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. There doesn't seem to be anything that comes to mind right away. So it's interesting that this is put into our Friday night Kiddush. And the source for doing such a thing comes from the Talmud itself. The Talmud in Masechet Pesachim says, "V'amar Rav Achar bar Yaakov, Sar Yazkir Yitzias Mitzrayim b'Kiddush Hayom." Rav Achar bar Yaakov says that one must mention the Exodus of Egypt in the Kiddush that we make on Shabbos. V'kasav chacha laman tiskor es yom, u'kasav hasam zachar es yom haShabbos lakadsha. So we have two verses that the Talmud compares to one another to teach us that you have to mention the Exodus from Egypt in your Kiddush. And in fact, the commentaries say that based on this Talmud, this piece from the Talmud, that if you do not mention Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, you do not mention the Exodus in your Kiddush, you have not fulfilled your obligation of making Kiddush for Friday night Shabbos. Which is astounding because what is the connection between Shabbos and Yetzias Mitzrayim, the leaving of Egypt? There doesn't seem to be any intrinsic connection that just pops out at somebody. Suggest maybe an original answer. Let's look at the prayer that we utter on Shabbos, Shachris of Shabbos Amida, the Shemon Esrei. The first words of it are V'yismach Moshe b'matanas chalko. Moshe rejoiced in the gift of his portion. So that's the beginning of the middle section of the Amida for Shabbos Shachris. Now, what does it reference when it says Yismach Moshe ben Vatanas Chalko? Moshe rejoiced in the gift of his portion. What is it a reference to when it says the gift of his portion? What was Moshe's gift? What was his portion? So to this, we have to be familiar with the words of the Tur. The Tur says that what happened was, and this is based on Midrashim, that when Moshe Rabbeinu was in Egypt, we know that he had a lot of sway growing up in the palace with Pharaoh, and he saw the Jews working extremely hard, and they were working 7 days a week. And Moses one day went up to Pharaoh and said to him, "Hey, this is not conducive to have slaves working 7 days a week." And Pharaoh says, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "Nobody has anybody work 7 days a week. They should have a day off. In fact, if you give them a day off, they will be more productive the other 6 days, that they will produce more product for you in those 6 days than they do currently for you in 7 days." So Pharaoh was like, "Oh, okay, it kind of makes sense, maybe. Well, what day do you propose they should get off?" And Moshe said, "How about the seventh day of the week?" Wasn't random that Moshe chose that day, right? And Pharaoh said, "Okay, maybe. That sounds enticing, but I don't know. It's going to maybe make me look weak. It's going to make me look weak. Give them a day off? That's weakness." To which Moshe Rabbeinu says back to Pharaoh, "No, on the contrary, it's going to make you look even more powerful than before." He says, "What do you mean?" Pharaoh says, "How is it going to make me look more powerful than I did before?" Because if you were to go up to one of the people who you're now giving a day off, and you'd say, "Hey, why aren't you working today?" This is what they're going to say out of their mouths. Because Pharaoh is my boss, and he told me that I have to rest today. I'm his servant. I work for him 6 days a week, and today I'm also serving him by being off so that I can work for him better. So actually, it will make you look powerful. Lahavdil, there's a scene in Schindler's List where Schindler talks to the general, and he says to him, "You can just be as powerful by pardoning somebody as you can by killing them." Meaning the power to pardon somebody is equivalent, if not more powerful, than the power to have somebody executed. So this was essentially the point, Lahavdil, that Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to make to Pharaoh. And he bought into it. He said, fine, you've convinced me. I will give them that day off. Now, here's a misconception that certain people have about freedom. And you'll read this in the works of Victor Miller, that the Jewish people were not set free to just do whatever they want. Okay, that's not why we were free. We don't celebrate Passover because now we are not slaves. No, 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 we still are slaves. Okay, we're just not slaves to Pharaoh anymore. We are slaves to God. Have you ever seen how much work it takes to be an Orthodox Jew? How much time consuming it is? Nobody would call that freedom, right? Meaning we went from, okay, back-breaking labor to having to be in shul every day for 2 hours and having to learn Torah every day for 10 hours and having to clean our house for Pesach and having to, set up sukkahs. So we went from one type of service to another type of service. Because the point of freedom was not to do whatever we want. The point of freedom of the Exodus was to serve Hashem. So now we can connect that back to what we were speaking about. See, when we were in Egypt, if somebody would have asked us, why are you not working today? And it would have been what we call Shabbos, it would have been the seventh day. That person would have said, because Pharaoh is my Lord, he's over me, and he controls me, and he commanded that today I have the day off. But after the Exodus from Egypt, a Jew's answer now was truly, I am a servant now of Hashem, the one and only God. And he commands me to not work on this day. So by us resting on the Sabbath, we are testifying to God's power in creation and his lordiness over the entire world. And that was only possible for us to be able to do that through the leaving of Egypt, because prior to that, we were doing that through Pharaoh when we were resting on the seventh day. But once we rested, once we were released from Egypt, now we're doing that to Hashem. And now it makes perfect sense when our Friday night davening says that keeping Shabbos is a zecher liyetzias Mitzrayim. It's a remembrance of the Exodus of Egypt. It makes perfect sense. Because only through the Exodus of Egypt are we able to say that we can rest on the Shabbos day because God commanded us to do it, not because anybody else commanded us to do it.